listening to the HR Mixtape, your podcast with the perfect mix of practical advice, thought-provoking interviews, and stories that just hit different so that work doesn't have to feel, well, like work. Now, your host, Sherry Simpson.
Joining me today is Kim Nemkovich. She's the Senior HR Business Continuity Manager at Amazon. She started life in retail and e-commerce and HR about 16 years ago, and in the last few years has found her wheelhouse in building teams and driving work culture improvements. She leads with humor, empathy, and tears. Her ultimate goal is being authentic and genuine to help her team deliver results. Kim, thank you so much for jumping on with me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
So you pride yourself on not being, the run-of-the-mill HR person. So I thought we could kick things off by maybe you sharing a memorable incident or moment where your unique approach to HR really shined.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me a while to find my HR style. For a long time, I didn't know if I could actually cut it in HR because my first HR job, I was very different than my peers and the other folks that had the same role. And so I tried to be more like them. I, felt uncomfortable doing that. And of course, I was then second guessing my own intuition. And so over time, I really found that, when you find your HR people, so to speak, right, the ones that you see yourself in, it really helps you find your own voice and be confident in who you are, right? Because there's just so many different types of people who work in HR, and you want to find the ones that help you find your own voice as well. So one of the things that I've, experienced and focused on a lot is development of my team and the teams I work with, just trying to impart whatever knowledge or learnings I've gained over the years, right? And I was conducting a mock interview with a leader that was up for promotion, right? Helping with the format of their responses, digging in from our data and results, and just really trying to test him, right? And at the end of the mock, before I could stop myself, I told him there was no way in hell I would ever promote him, right? And a little aggressive, right? A little forward for HR, and certainly probably shouldn't have used the H word. But then I went into telling him all the things that he did wrong, right? And he just kind of sat there in shock, knowing he had done poorly, but maybe not ready to hear just how poorly. And then I told him all the things I recommended he should do to prepare. And that was going to be an additional 40 hours of work on top of his current 60-hour work week. And so he kind of whimpered out of my office and looked defeated, right? And 2 weeks later, he shows up and he's got this huge grin on his face, right? And he'd passed the interview loop and got promoted. And he told me that the direct feedback that I gave him was his catalyst, right? Like if it hadn't been delivered that way, if I just said, well, you could really do these things, he wasn't going to take the same aggressive approach to really reformatting everything and taking a different approach. So that part is exciting for me, right? Because I'm glad he got promoted and I wanted to help him. James is a great manager, still is to this day. But what I love most about that is now I still have people that reach out, other leaders in the company that say, hey, I talked to James. I'm going for promotional interviews. He really recommended that I mock interview with you based on your feedback you've provided him.
What a great testament to how HR can show up in a really transparent way. And I'm sure that you delivered that message with compassion, but also very clearly, so that, James was prepared to hear it. I think sometimes we sugarcoat things and people sometimes just need that really authentic, raw information to be able to hear it in the moment. So I love that story. How have you taken some of those tactics and used them for really building your own HR team?
I think in a lot of ways, it's that forward openness that gives the team the opportunity to understand where they're going, right? And what the right approach can be. And if I'm not direct with them, it gets wishy-washy, right? And I've gotten that feedback before too, right? Where, I'm not really clear on what the deliverable is and what you want from me. Where I'm thinking, I'm telling them to think big and make up their own plans and decisions. And so it really, without that directness, it really can be challenging, not just to build the team, but also to give them the right guidance to help them feel confident in what they're going to do.
I know that throughout your career and your messaging, you have mentioned leading with humor and empathy and maybe occasionally tears. I'm curious, how do you see these aspects shaping the culture in companies that you've worked with?
Oh, I love this question. So one of my favorite quotes is laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. And Dolly Parton. That was her character in the movie Still Magnolias who said that. And I, definitely funnel her into my life in many ways, both personally and professional. But I think, my approach is wearing my emotions on my sleeve. I share my fears and my excitement in equal measure with the teams. And I found that by humbling myself in front of others, it has helped them to feel open too. And these human feelings are what gives the business life, right? That's what helps show why we spend 40 or more hours a week together with these folks by choice. How the company's policy is applied by these humans is what shapes the culture, right? So it's not just this policy shapes the culture; it's how we take it, interpret it, and apply it in a variety of different ways. And like I've worked in retail customer facing HR roles. I've worked in distribution or fulfillment center roles. And for the last 4 years, I've been in more virtual and traveling roles supporting a logistics network. And in each of those, I've experienced happy, sad, angry, and even scary moments with my coworkers and with my directs. And in many of these situations, I've needed to be the voice of reason and take the appropriate action. And if you haven't already shown the team your true self, they don't trust you in those moments. And that's the thing I try to impart on my leaders within the organization, right? Like be yourself, show who you are, and don't feel like you have to separate your personal and your professional lives. You are one person and it all applies in both spaces.
There's so much truth to showing up as your authentic self and in all the ways that you're messy. I've shared on the podcast a little bit about my sons. I am a military mom. I have 3 kids in the military, and my youngest just went to boot camp in June. And that was a hard time for me. It's the first time I've been an empty nester and going through not having children at home anymore and being able to show up at work and say, you know what? I'm a little soft emotionally this day. So this is the level you're going to get out of me today has been one of the most things I've appreciated with the work I do and the supervisors and the teams that I work with, because I do have that space to show up as my authentic self. As you've worked with your HR teams, I think sometimes lots of people can fall into, the Monday morning blues or the Sunday scaries or whatever the catchphrase is. And I always think of Office Space when she's, answering the phone and like the whole
case of the Mondays.
Yes, case of the Mondays. How do you keep your HR team motivated with some of the tactics you've talked about so that they go into Mondays with a full cup and their cup stays full, throughout the week?
It's a challenge, right? And it depends on how your team is set up and how interactive you are. My team right now, we're all virtual. So I sit in my office at home. They sit in their offices at home. Fortunately, we're going to meet this week and see each other in person, which is nice. But, it's about staying connected through each of the different ways that we run off separately during the week, right? So we have a team meeting each Monday, and, being virtual, it helps us connect. We discuss our plans, the challenges that we're facing, right? And I like to try to understand, what can I either remove from their plate or change or deprioritize to help them feel like they have the time and energy and support to get through that week. I like to find out about their weekend, what did their, kid's 5th birthday party, how did it go? How did the cake turn out, right? I have one person on my team who makes these beautiful cakes. And so always asking about those, did they go camping? How was the trip? I have a Denver Nuggets fan who was very excited very recently because they won the championship. So it's kind of asking more and understanding more about their personal lives and doing it because you care, I think makes an impact too. And that's one of the challenges that I try to help our leaders overcome is you don't just ask to get a result. You ask because you care. And if you don't care, it's going to show, right? But I try to make sure that we're talking about both personally and professional. Kind of harkens back to my previous, the previous question you asked me. We're the same person. We're just doing different things in our personal and professional lives. And so I try to maintain it through that week, right? Because you're right. It's 40, 50, 60 hours, depending on what's going on of, trying to tackle the biggest problems that we've seen in our careers. And so on Wednesdays, I have the team recap their project statuses and outline their challenges for the rest of the week so that I can jump in and escalate, get our leadership involved more to solve more problems. And at the same time, we've built out some mechanisms for engagement that help us to connect and learn about each other, right? So if we don't have the mechanism, it's just going to fall by the wayside because it's not in our top goals or priorities for the company or for our team. So like we'll try things. Last week, we had World Music Day. Everyone shared their favorite songs and why they loved it in our Slack channel. And we made it into a playlist, and now we all have it to enjoy and listen to everybody's songs and, kind of get to know each other and understand what people do to decompress or, why they love a song or things like that. And I think one of the things that's had the most long-standing impact, about 4 years ago, I started something with one of my previous teams, and it was called a Thankful Thursday call. And we would each jump on. It was at the end of the day, and we would say one thing that we are professionally thankful for and one that we're personally thankful for. And it was just such a great way to wrap up our Thursday and be ready to just finalize the week on Friday and go in with a positive attitude.
How have you supported your employees when they're empty? And a lot of times in HR, we can reach that where we've given so much. We have empathy burnout, we have compassion fatigue, and we still are giving high discretionary effort, and so we walk into our HR leader's office and safe space, right? And so you kind of lose yourself for a moment. How do you help people engage when they're in that moment? Because HR can be a very taxing role to be in.
Oh, absolutely. I can't count the number of times that someone's cried in my office and I cry with them. And I don't know if that's helping, but it certainly connects us, right? I feel their pain when they come in. And I think a lot of HR professionals have that same impact, right? Of you sit there and you live in that moment with them. And then it's really kind of up to me to find out what can help them through it. First is listening, right? I think so often we're problem solvers, right? We want to make everything better. I'm always like constantly like, what do you need? What can I do? How can I do it? And I'm like, when do I ask that for myself? Right. And so I try to flip it and say, okay, let me hear what they're saying. Let me see if there are things that are pressing in their statements that could be impacted by something I do, right? Can I give them an extra day off? Do they need to finish out the day? Do I need to send them a little care package, right? I had a girl, bless her heart, she lost 2 weeks worth of work because her computer crashed. And we were launching the training that she had created the following week. Mini heart attack, right? I think back to college and all the papers that I lost because I fell asleep because I stayed up way too late trying to write them, right? But, in her instance, like she had there was nothing that could be done except we needed time and we needed, space to get it done. And, we extended out the time so that we could get her that extra time to pull it back together. And I sent her a little care package, right? It was something simple. She lives 1,000 miles away. But that's the joy of things like DoorDash and Grubhub and all of those where you can, if you have somebody's address, you can send them a little package, a little treat. And so send her some caffeinated drinks, send her some desserts, send her, a card, trying to help her see that, I've got her back and whatever she needs, I'll do it. And while there was nothing we could determine on that call that I could fix, here's something to show like, you're doing a great job. You're going to get through this, and wherever I can help, let me know. And I think it's those moments of listening, asking the question of what can I do? Also knowing that a lot of times people won't say, oh, here's what I need, or because they're in it, they're stuck. And so taking what they've told you and trying to find ways to solve their problem when they're just too deep in it.
Yeah, there's so many times you can be just so deep. And as you were sharing that story about her losing all of her stuff, I felt that in my soul because I have been there where you've been working so passionately on something and the second time around just isn't as good. Let's be honest. Like you kind of gave 100% the first time around, and not that it's going to be bad, but it's like when you take a test, right? And they tell you not to go back and change your answer because your first answer is probably the correct one. You've shared, a lot about your journey and about your approach to building your HR team. But you kind of fell into HR, which a lot of us have who are in the HR space. I'd love to hear your story and how you got into HR.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was in high school, college, you're going through that career search of what do I want to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? I didn't know that HR existed. I literally didn't know what human resources meant. I knew companies had them, but I was never, it just sounded, I don't know. Okay. So when I went to school for graphic design. I planned to move to the big city after that and get a job in graphic design after college. I went to Youngstown State University, which is a smaller state school in between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. So I figured I'd land in one of those two. I ended up landing in Pittsburgh. And after I moved there, I actually ended up doing an internship in San Francisco with a graphic design firm. And I found that I really didn't like creating designs for other people. That control freak in me, learned that other people, in my opinion, had horrible taste, and I could not stand that they were ignoring my professional advice. Like I went to school for this. I know what I'm talking about, right? That young confidence, that bravado that you have. So when I moved to Pittsburgh and was completing that internship, and I was like, oh man, I don't know. Now I've got to search for a different career. I started working for a big box retailer, and I was overseeing a couple different departments while I was searching for, what am I going to land in? My supervisor there actually identified that maybe I'd be a good fit for their executive leadership program. And I was like, leadership, what's that? Right. And so I started taking some of the classes that they have. And eventually I actually interviewed for their salaried leadership roles and was fortunate enough to get that. And then they asked the question of, well, which role do you feel is best for you? And, they've got all the, I'm in retail. So it's, sales floor, logistics, guest experience or customer experience roles. Anybody who worked where I worked will now know exactly which company I'm talking about because I said guest experience, just spoiler alert. But after working there for a while, I was like, I saw that HR was the role that got to drive, engagement and fun. And they were always, talking to the team and, getting to share positive messages. And, it's different everywhere, but it was like, I want to have that experience where I can focus more on people than on a process, right? I didn't want to set planograms and, run a register or that sort of thing. And so, between that and seeing that they got to be on conference calls, which I thought was so cool, little did I know how uncool they are. But, as I went through that process, I was like, I think I want to do HR. And either fortunately or unfortunately enough, they put me in it, right? They're like, okay, we're going to let you do this. Like, you've never had a leadership role before. Put you in HR, which I don't know. I don't know that I trust their judgment on that, but thankfully it worked. And the rest is history. Since then, I've had probably, I should have probably done the math, 7 or 8 different roles in a variety of different, 2 different companies really that I've worked in HR for, both large companies and both very different styles. And I think I would have never found this on the path I was on. So I'm really appreciative that, I tanked that internship. Like it's a really good thing that graphic design was not my ending career, because I think it would have been much shorter. And I'm a better person for working in human resources.
If we could take anything away from that story, it's conference calls are not cool. I absolutely love that you had that mentality going into it, because that warms my heart, because I completely agree. You shared throughout our conversation some really cool tactical things that I just wanted to highlight around, supporting your team. Send them a little something, a treat. It doesn't have to be this big, grandiose gesture. It can just be like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I wrote down Thankful Thursdays. Love that. I'm sure our listeners can totally steal that. And then the last one, the team playlist. Think that is a genius idea, because there's always go-to songs for, hey, my workout go-to song, my chill in my office song, my fold my laundry song, all that stuff. Yeah. Being that we're on the HR mixtape, and you think about your own kind of journey, what would you say is like your opening track or your triumphant closer, like some of the things that you think of as those pillars for your HR journey?
Yeah, when I think about that, this is a tough one, because you think about 15 years and how do you boil it down to those 3, kind of sections of your life. And I think the first part was so much growth, right? And learning and understanding what leadership is, and then human resources itself, right? I think that first part was trying to be successful by doing everything on my own, right? I spent years thinking that I had to do all the work. And I finally learned that when I hit a wall, that I had to teach my team to take on new things, allow myself to step up into larger spaces and take on new challenges as well. Because if I was going to try to, run the world, like Beyonce, right? Who runs the world, right? I thought I was going to run it all by myself, but no, it's all of us if you use our, resources appropriately. And it took, I want to say it was like a 4 to 5 year time frame of me getting real close to burnout, because I just tried to do everything on my own. I think as I was learning that I couldn't do everything by myself, I also then learned that my team's successes lead to my own successes as well, right? As a leader, you typically have far more tasks, far fewer tasks that you accomplish, right? Like I'm not ticking off a list of, create this or do that. It's more check in with this person, read up on that, follow up on this document. It's never the same. Personally, I get like nice dopamine hits, right? When you check something off the list, and it's less of that in a leadership role. It's the follow up, it's support, it's removing barriers and adjusting your mindset to supporting others, completing their work is a game changer. And that's, I think, where I really felt my ability as a leader expand a lot more. I feel immense pride for the accomplishments of my teams. They're remarkable individuals that came together and they made so much impact. And without me learning that they needed to be successful, and that I was the, barrier buster for them, they wouldn't have had the right support to achieve as much as they have. And then I think with the closing track, it's about embracing failure as a teaching tool. None of us want to fail, right? It hurts. I know I get disappointed in myself. I'm my worst critic. I think, a lot of times we feel like we've let others down. We get nervous about our own ability to accomplish things, right? And so I take time after each project, whether it's a good project that had great results or one that had some opportunities that we're going to need to work through, to meet with the owners and talk about what did go well, right? Because even in bad projects, or ones with bad results, there's still good things that come from that. What could have gone better and how they're going to apply what they learned on future projects, right? It's simple, follow up and check and correct. But I think I focus on talking about the tough stuff and then moving on, right? Don't belabor it, get, past it, find ways to make it successful, right? Like, I know they say failing up is a bad thing, right? Meaning you're not that great and somehow you keep failing up the ladder, right? I think of this as kind of failing forward, so that it doesn't have the negative connotation, right? Using what we mess up to help us take the right steps down the path.
I love that. What a great outline for a future in HR. Start with growth. Learn about developing your team and successes, and then leverage failure for continued growth as you continue your career. Love those, Kim. What a great discussion. Thanks for taking a few minutes of your day to chat with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Sherry. It's been so fun.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find show notes and links at thehrmixtape.com. Come back often and please subscribe, rate, and review.